Right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining. This session will be covering a little bit about attribution modeling and how we applied it at HP to a ongoing long-term corporate sponsorship. So I'll just start by introducing those of us on the call. So speaking, Mick Hedberg, I'm a principal at Foresight Associates. So we're a management consultancy. We specialize in forward-looking analytics, data-driven type of work, a lot of modeling. I personally lead our marketing and sponsorships practice, which we really focus on trying to bring data into the conversation around strategic planning, measuring performance, and tracking of sponsorships. And then I'll let Cesare introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Mick. Cesare here. I lead global marketing in HP for our industrial printing division. I will speak in a bit about what industrial printing is all about, but fundamentally covers digitally printed labels, packaging, and commercial applications. And I've been in the company for more than 10 years across B2B and B2C and different capacity. So I've been working with Mick on these analysis, and over the next minutes and time, we will walk you through some of the findings that we came across. Okay, so a little bit about HP Indigo and what we do, a little bit to understand the product and the type of sponsorship that we studied. Indigo has been a pioneer in digital printing technology. It has been in the market for many years already and is leading the market, especially in certain applications, like I mentioned before. We are talking about high capital equipment presses that go on print factory. They can easily take a floor of a manufacturer plant. And of course, we also provide associated consumables like so-called ink, and of course, services around the press. This environment is a typical B2B enterprise environment, although most of these customers might have an SMB connotation in the sense that they are family owned, but is definitely a high capital equipment purchase that is made once in 5 to 7 years with a very, very long sales cycle and requires an assisted sales from sales reps. We do cover a wide variety of applications from commercial printing, think of high quality magazine, high quality books as well, but really anything from flyers to marketing material down to photo labels, especially high quality labels, flexible packaging, especially in the food and drink industry. And a little bit about what we have been working with Mick on as a bit atypical enterprise business, which is maybe a lot oriented with sales enablement. We also had an ongoing sponsorship for many years, and this is basically a community of user of our products. But is an independent association. So this generated a positive word of mouth, good feedback, and overall some qualitative positive sentiment in the community and in the company. But we came to a point where there was a very limited quantitative understanding of how and how much this sponsorship contributed to the business. And in an assisted sales environment, much of it could have been left to the sentiment of the day, or maybe to the memories of the latest event. So we have been focusing on some measurement exercises in order to better understand the ROI of the partnership, both looking at direct and indirect impact, primarily with two goals. One is to understand the impact of the sponsorship to date, so more backward looking, and another objective, more forward looking, to understand how we could scale or leverage this sponsorship going into the coming year and bring it to new heights.
Perfect. So now I'll get a little bit into the data that we used and the process that we took to try to answer some of these questions. So first and foremost, the core data set that we were using to do this modeling, this analysis, was a CRM database containing leads, opportunities, conversion rates, etc. And so what we were doing was applying attribution modeling to try and weight the importance of different touch points to their sales funnel. So we did have tracking around different touch points related specifically to the sponsorship. And so what the model was designed to do, and you'll see a little bit of a visualization at the bottom, was to think about when there's a lead that has an interaction with this sponsorship, what's the conversion rate that we see with those leads, and how does that compare to other marketing touch points? Now, before we get into too much on the modeling and the findings, I think probably everybody in this session is pretty familiar with the idea, but well, it's always good to make the point that the modeling we do is only as good as the data that's behind it. And so the start of this process, the first, several weeks of work is all about extensive diagnostic work and cleaning of the data to make sure that before we apply any of the modeling, we have a data set that we really feel confident in. And so there were several things that we identified in this process, things like normal things that you might find, like tracking duplicate entries, cleaning those out of the database. We had to do some accounting for 2020. We're talking about a multi-year sponsorship, so we're able to group together several years of data to have a strong sample size. But we made the choice ultimately to exclude 2020 just because of the effects of COVID. And then also there's a process of identifying possible data entry errors. And so just at the bottom, you can see a visualization of one of those, which was looking at the opportunity lifespan, which simply refers to how long was a lead in the database from the moment it was entered to the moment it was either won or lost. And just looking at simple cuts like this of the data allowed us to identify possible outliers, flag different potential entry errors. And in some cases, we simply can remove outliers, but in other cases, we're able to go back with the team and review those that seem to have some errors and find actually ways to still include them in the data, if we're able to understand what was going on with those specific entries. So once we have a really clean data set that we feel good about, it's about implementing the modeling approach, which we use Markov chain algorithms here. And so when we implement that process, one thing that was really important here was that we ran an experiment whereby we would take out all the sponsorship touch points and see what would happen if we rerouted those leads through other touch points at fair share. And this is how we started to really get down to an understanding of how much do we think the sponsorship was contributing to overall win rates across the business. Critically, and Cesare made this point at the top of the call, it was not enough just to look at the direct impact on sales. There's also a sense that there's a strong indirect impact of this sponsorship on brand health and reputation. And so we really focused on net promoter scores to help understand that. And so I'll talk about this more here. It's really important to understand how when we look at direct and indirect impacts, which is a really common theme with sponsorships in general, is the idea that there's an effect on both the short-term bottom line, but also the broader brand health. It's really important when doing that process that we have a secondary weighting process in place to avoid double counting those effects. And so we had a separate analysis where we looked at how do these direct and indirect factors work together to drive the business in general. And then we used that analysis to then make sure when we put those things together, we had a combined total impact that didn't double count different effects. And just one last point here is also lifetime value. Cesare mentioned the associated consumables and services that come with selling a press. And so when placing a value on the sponsorship, it was important that we were also evaluating the lifetime value that went along with winning a new account. Okay, and so one really interesting thing that we did here was we took that same model, once we had put all the resources in to actually clean the data, get a good data set, build a working model. We took that same model and we then applied it to several other marketing initiatives that were tracked in the same data set. Because our initial model suggested there was very positive return on investment from the sponsorship, but what we didn't know was how that compared to other marketing programs that they were also running, which is important to understand because we want to know whether we should be spending more, spending less, reallocating that investment to other areas. And so in order to provide those benchmarks, we took the exact same approach, applied it to other marketing programs, And this started to form a picture of how that sponsorship compared to other initiatives. So you can see on the left just a visual representation of what that ended up looking like. We could see that the sponsorship not only had a positive ROI, but also compared favorably and in fact had a better return on investment than most of the other initiatives that we reviewed. Another critical point here is that we didn't just do a total top-down model on all of the data. We actually built it up across a few cuts of the data. So we built models at the regional level and then summarized those up to the global level. And the reason that was important is that it allowed us, once we got the results, to actually have more actionable findings, because we were able to see which regions were we really seeing stronger or weaker performance. And so we did, in fact, find some regions that really outperformed others. And it ended up being a catalyst really for follow-up studies about what drove that weaker or stronger performance, and most importantly, trying to find which learnings we could carry across to other regions to help scale the whole sponsorship globally. And that's actually not the only cut of the data where we kind of did lower level models that then rolled up into a total picture. We also cut the model by new business accounts versus repeat business accounts. And this was really important because it ended up telling a unique story that was not necessarily expected when we started the work. What we found is that the sponsorship actually had a clear impact on new business, even more so than winning repeat business from existing customers. And when we did this same exercise across the other benchmark initiatives we've been comparing to, we found that actually there were no other among the top programs that actually did as much to contribute to new business as the sponsorship did. And so it turned out that not only do we have good, favorable ROI that compared well to benchmarks, also we had a really clear business role for this initiative that was unique from the other programs they were running. And this one really helped to drive discussions about how do we align resources and how do we make sure, for example, that the sales staff, that the whole organization understands what the role of this sponsorship is, and make sure that we're using it and leveraging it in that way to really help to drive new business. So to recap on some of the findings, one is the importance of a statistical audit at the beginning of a process like this to help uncover which cleaning rules need to be put in place. This is nothing new, but it's always important to reiterate the importance, because what we found is that some of the cleaning that we did really did impact the final results and would have been, we could have gone in a different direction if we hadn't really been diligent about cleaning the data and identifying any flags early on. Another is the importance of lifetime value and the ability to properly place a value on any marketing program or initiative, and really doing the thinking about how does, especially in a business like this where the press then comes along with consumables and services down the road, how do we make sure we account for the lifetime value and not only the short-term returns? And then there's the point about direct versus indirect, and this is one we talked about quite a bit, and it was a critical piece of this project was to understand how those two things help to drive the sponsorship in general. And I'll reiterate here, whenever we're talking about indirect and direct effects, it's always important to have some level of a weighting exercise to avoid double counting. And I'll just make the note as well that when we talk about indirect effects, this is an area where commonly we end up having to do more non-traditional custom type approaches, which we didn't get a chance to talk a lot about today, but when it came to that side of it, we really had to be more creative with how we conducted the modeling. And then finally, the learning that once you put all the resources to create a model and you have a data set, depending on your context, it may be an easy win to take that same model and apply it to several other marketing programs or several other parts of that data set. And this is useful in two ways. One, because it's a benchmarking exercise to understand whether the effects in the program of interest compare favorably to other programs. But two, it's a way to validate the model and ensure that it's working effectively, that you're getting reasonable results across different types of programs. And so that was an important learning as well. And then just finally, a couple of notes on the impact of this work. So one, this exercise did provide evidence to renew the sponsorship, and it's also helping to plan investment levels going forward. We've also been able to now build a business case for leveraging the sponsorship and also investing in particular areas or regions where there's more headroom to scale the impact of the partnership. And then finally, there's clear proof points now around how should we be thinking about this sponsorship and how should it be used. So now there's a more clear objective and set of KPIs for this asset, for the sponsorship, than there ever was in the past. So I'll leave it there. I want to again thank everybody for joining the session and look forward to talking with you all at the panel.